All right, I'm in the Gospel of John, chapter 18. Gospel of John, chapter 18. Kind of finishing up towards the end of John, chapter 18. This was when Jesus was brought before Pilate. All right, now Jesus was arrested by the Romans. He was arrested by the Romans in the garden, and then he was taken to the home of Annas, the high priest Annas, and he was the high priest because the people recognized him as the legitimate high priest. And I was explaining this in the previous messages that the Romans just dropped him off over there, most likely because they did not have Judas present in order to testify at a trial at the Roman compound. So they arrested him, but they turned him over to Annas, and then they would leave. They would leave and they would go back to the Roman compound. Jesus had a trial there at the home of Annas, and that was relatively short. He then was taken to the home of Caiaphas, who was the high priest who was put in that position as the high priest by the Romans. And I explained this in previous messages. And so he had a trial there, and then after that trial, then the people who had Jesus, they took him to the Roman compound. All right? They bring him up to the Roman compound, and so this is where we're at in John chapter 18, when the people bring him to the Roman compound. But why? What did he do? Did he violate any Roman law? And the answer, of course, is no. He didn't even violate any laws of the Sanhedrin that would justify them even arresting him or having a trial. None of that was justified. None of that was reasonable. So they're going to bring Jesus over to the Roman compound. The Roman soldiers had already arrested him and dropped him off somewhere else, and then they went back to the Roman compound. And so they are there. It is now early in the morning, could still partially be considered to be part of the evening even. The soldiers will have settled in there by now, and they will have been making the assumption that all of this is over. This is all taken care of. We don't have to worry about this anymore, especially because they just had a profound religious experience of going to the ground because Jesus told them who he was. All right, and I talked about that in previous messages. So the Romans are probably settling in, thinking all of that was over, only to find the people, a whole bunch of people, a whole lot of them are bringing Jesus. They're by force. They are forcing him by taking him to the Roman compound. They show up at the gate or the door, at the front door of the Roman compound, demanding that they execute Jesus for a crime that, well, they won't tell the Romans what that crime is. Just execute this guy. All right, that's where we are. So this is in John chapter 18. I'm going to begin in verse 28. In verse 28, then they led Jesus from Caiaphas to the praetorium, and it was early morning, but they themselves did not go into the praetorium, lest they should be defiled, but that they might eat the Passover. And I was explaining at the end of the previous message that this Passover would be the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. This is when the Seder meal would take place. The Passover meal that Jesus had with his disciples was 24 hours before this. So you have the Passover meal, and then Jesus is arrested, and then you have the next day, and then in the evening on the following day, which would be 24 hours after the Passover meal, you would then have another, what they would call a Passover meal, but it was technically, according to the law of Moses, the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. All right, and they did not want to miss out on that, because that, if you're familiar with the Passover Seders, you'll recognize that that's kind of a profound event. The Passover meal is relatively boring in comparison with the Seder meal. And so they didn't want to miss out on that. If they became ritually unclean, they would have to leave the city limits until the sun went down, until there were 3 stars visible in the sky. and it is unlikely that they would be able to return in time to enjoy the Passover meal. And so they did not want to go in there and become ritually defiled, as they were concerned about that. All right, and so in verse 29, Pilate then went out to them and said, "What accusation do you bring against this man?" All right, they're not going to go into the Roman compound, so Pilate goes out to them. He's been notified. There's a big crowd of people out there. They don't want to come in here, but they want to see you. So Pilate goes out to them and asks them, all right, what is the accusation? What has this guy done? All right, what's all of this about? And they do not have an accusation. You keep reading, verse 30. They answered and said to him, if he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. Well, if he didn't do anything wrong, we wouldn't have brought him here. All right, now to them, I guess they feel that they have answered the question. All right, Pilate asks them, what has this guy done? They say, well, if he hasn't done anything wrong, we wouldn't have brought him here. You didn't answer the question. That is not a legitimate answer to the question. That's a way of saying he hasn't done anything. That's what they said, even though it sounds like, they're doing something good, that they have this evildoer. All right. But what they are really saying is that we have brought this guy here who has done nothing wrong. That is what they said, and they shouldn't be allowed to get away with this. Pilate should just say it the way it is. In effect, I would probably say something to that effect, that you people, you have just notified me, thank you. You have told me that you have nothing to accuse this guy of. And so who are these people, right? Who are these people? What are these people trying to accomplish? All right, all they are doing is abusing this guy, Jesus. That's all they're doing. And they're abusing Pilate too. Pilate has other things to do, I'm sure, besides stand out there and listen to this kind of nonsense and to deal with this kind of stuff going on. All right, these are people who have decided to cause harm to others. All right, and they're doing it by force, and they're doing it by these demands, and they're disrupting Pilate's life. These are extremely violent people. All right, that is what you've got here. It's got to be said the way it really is. These people are extremely violent people. All right? Now, they are extremely violent in the sense that they are forcibly taking someone, away from their lives and bringing them up here like this. Now, you might think an extremely violent person has to be a person who does some harm that is greater than this, that they're just disrupting people's lives, and they're forcing people into situations and scenarios, and they're just applying their ability to cause disruption in people's lives. And you might think, well, that's not such a bad, violent act in comparison with what they might really do. Well, the point is that this is what they can do without being punished. All right, they're not going to suffer from this. They're not going to be arrested for this and put on trial for this. That's not what's going to happen. But that doesn't mean that it's not an act of extreme violence. It still is an act of extreme violence that is accomplished through a dysfunction or an inability for the law to be able to prosecute. All right, they are working the boundaries of the law so that they are not going to have to suffer themselves for the violence that they perpetrate, but they're going to do it anyway. All right. And that's just the way it can be sometimes. That's just the way that the world can be. And there are people like this all the time. They're everywhere. And you may not have seen it yourself quite yet. You may not have encountered it personally. And you may not know that, you are surrounded by people who, if they had the opportunity, would they do this? And you would probably discover that many of them, oh, yes, absolutely would. Given the opportunity that they could cause extreme violence and harm to somebody else in a way that they're not going to experience any consequences or punishment for it, they will absolutely get into that. Yes, there are people who are like that. Many people who you would never guess, would do that kind of thing, but that really is the case. And that's what we have here. All right, that's what we have here. And people haven't changed since then. The only thing that's really changed is technology. That's about it. But the nature of a person has not changed at all, okay, in all these generations in any way. It's just the technological advancements and the tools that we have at our disposal. That's all that's different. So they take Jesus to Pilate. He asks them, why are you here? What is this about? And they will not give an answer, a legitimate answer. Their response is a way of saying that they do not have a legitimate reason to be there. Okay, they answered, and this is in verse 30, they answered and said to him, if he were not an evildoer, we would not have delivered him up to you. Oh, that sounds just so wonderful, I guess, but it really is just another way of saying we are here because we are evildoers for bringing him here up to you. That would be the proper way of understanding what they just said. In verse 31, then Pilate said to them, you take him and judge him according to your law. All right? Why are you here? Well, we don't have a good reason, all right? So Pilate says, fine, you go, get out of here, leave, depart, get away from me, get out of my life. You judge him according to your law. Obviously, he has not done anything in violation of Roman law. So maybe he's done something in violation of your law. All right? If he's done something against your law, then go see what you can do. But, don't bring him over here if he has not done anything in violation of our laws. All right? And you would think that this would be the end of it, right? It's not the end of it at all. You go on. Therefore the Jews said to him, this is in verse 31, therefore the Jews said to him, it is not lawful for us to put anyone to death. Okay, supposedly, I guess it's lawful for them to physically restrain someone and forcibly take them like this. Supposedly that's lawful. All right, but it's not lawful for them to just murder him, to just put him to death, right? That's not lawful. It's not lawful for us to do that. Now, what they're saying is that you have decided, the Romans had decided that they were not going to have the authority, that they don't have the authority to execute anyone. All right? But what has he done to justify an execution? Obviously, nothing. He has done nothing against Roman law that would justify an execution. Maybe he's done something that's violated their law that has justified execution, but that would have to be compatible with Roman law, and the Romans are not going to allow that to happen. They are going to intervene, or they are going to respond and consider that to be a murder. All right? And you know what? Maybe it's a good thing that it's not lawful for them to execute somebody. Because when you see this kind of behavior, that they're trying to get somebody, murdered, then of course they shouldn't have. These people should not have the authority to put anybody to death. All right, because obviously they have no regard for whether they're going to put somebody to death for a legitimate reason or not. You don't give a murderer the authority to murder. That's just plain wrong. Now this goes way back. There's some history to this. The Romans were not always in power. What was happening was that in this time period was that there was the Maccabean revolt, and the Jews won their freedom in the sense, and they were able to establish their own sovereign identity and their own sovereign country. But there was a lot of internal conflict that erupted after that. Eventually, there were the people known as the Hasmoneans who were able to obtain power, and there was a civil war within Israel as there were disagreements with the Hasmoneans. All right, and eventually it just got so bad that both sides of the Hasmonean civil war made an appeal to the Romans to come in and settle the conflict. All right, they both just asked the Romans to come in and solve the problems between the two parties, who obviously neither one was able to defeat the other one easily. So the Romans went in, and that was General Pompey. The Romans sent in General Pompey, who went in, and he made some decisions about how things were going to be resolved, and he resolved the conflict. Now, of course, a lot of people died, and there was a lot of destruction, but that's how it was done. And then there was the reorganization that took place. And in the reorganization of the land, the Romans established a compound, a permanent presence in that sense. And they established some rules. They said, look, okay, you people can govern yourselves with, in general, the day-to-day kind of stuff. And there were boundaries with regards to how far they could go when passing judgment against somebody else. And one of those things was that they would not have the right or the authority to put anybody to death. If anybody's going to get killed, then the Romans have to be a part of that decision. All right, without the Romans agreeing that this is going to be an execution, no execution is going to take place. And that was the present day at the time when this was happening. And then you've got this conversation, right, that just reinforces this, that justifies this even more, that the Romans should probably be in power, that they should be running things, when you've got these other people who are wanting to murder somebody for no reason, no legitimate reason. Okay, now there were some reasons that they had, okay, but these are not good reasons. They're not the kind of reasons that you would want to report to the Romans, to give an answer to this. Looking back at the previous messages that I presented in the previous chapters, you can see when the people conspired to try and have Jesus executed, there were some reasons that they gave. They were concerned that the Romans would come in and they would solve the problem. They would solve the problem of the risk of there being sedition and the potential of another war. And so the religious leadership, were concerned about this. And so they took the position that it was better to try to find some way to get Jesus executed than for the Romans to come in and conquer the region. And of course, what would happen if they did? Well, these religious leaders who failed to keep things under control, because there would be this war that would erupt. The Romans are going to blame the religious leaders, the Sanhedrin, the chief priests, and obviously the high priest, Caiaphas, who they put in power to keep these things under control. The Romans are going to come in and they're going to reorganize things again. And these leaders who were supposed to keep these things from happening to some degree, these leaders would be removed from their positions of authority. Okay, now the simple way to describe this is to say that these guys are going to have to go out and get a job, right? Instead of sitting around making the decisions for how other people are going to live and how other people are going to solve their problems, instead of that, they're going to have to go out and do something productive. They're actually going to have to produce something that's of use for somebody else. They're going to have to be of service to other people. I'm not saying that isn't a form of service, all right? But when you put it within the context of them acting like this, obviously they should not be the ones who are providing the services of helping people resolve and solve the problems of life, all right? And so they should go out and get a job, do something else. So they were concerned about having to get a job. They were concerned about the potential reorganization, which could be to such an extent that there would no longer be a nationalistic identity for the Jews. That there could be an assimilation, there could be deportation, there could be immigration, there could be all kinds of changes that the Romans could do in order to solve this problem so that it doesn't happen again. So these guys are worried about having to get a job, all right? And they're worried about the complete reorganization of their country. This is also an opportunity for them to be the saviors of the people. This is a big deal. They can be the saviors of the people because they prevented this kind of disruption from taking place. All right? But this is another way to look at it. You need to really put this really needs to be said, as many things need to be said often, to expose the truth. All right? Things have to be said in a way that there is no confusion about the way things really are. All right? This is the way things really are, and this is how I think it would be best to say this. These guys would rather murder somebody than get a job. All right? I'm going to say it again. These guys believe that it's better to commit murder than to have to go get a job. All right? Or it's better to commit murder so that you can be identified as the savior of the people. That's good from their perspective. All right? That when you put it in that context, it will show that these are extremely violent people. That's how it goes. And so, I wanted to say that because that's how it should really be recognized and expressed. And like I said, there are people today all around us who would certainly relate that way if they were given the opportunity. If they were given the opportunity, would they murder somebody? Well, in fact, I know a few people who probably would rather murder somebody than get a job. All right. I would rather not think about that too much. But if I was to go there and think about that, yeah, I could probably identify several people who would rather commit murder than get a job. No, I don't think that would be too difficult. I'm going to try really hard to just move on and not go there. I don't need that kind of disruption in my life at the moment. So proceeding, therefore the Jews said to him, "It is not lawful for us to put anyone to death." Verse 32 says, "That the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, which he spoke, signifying by what death he would die." All right, and that did signify by what death he would die, because the method of execution under the Mosaic law is you throw rocks at a person until they are dead. All right, it's stoning. The method of execution that the Romans used at this time, primarily in this area, was crucifixion. So that was what was conveyed by that the saying of Jesus might be fulfilled, signifying by what death he would die. And I'm not going to refer to the fulfillment of this at this time, but just to let you know that that's what he's talking about. He's talking about the crucifixion. I'm going to move forward into verse 33. Then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" All right, so this is how Jesus gets into the compound. All right? They say, "We don't have the authority to execute anyone." So Pilate goes back into the praetorium, back into the Roman compound, and then he calls out for Jesus, which means that officers are going to go and they're going to grab Jesus, and they're going to force him into the praetorium. They're not going to bring him into the Roman compound. Pilate made this decision because he was told that there is a situation here that is extremely serious that would justify execution. All right? They're not telling him what it is and what it's about. So he decides, considering that this seems to be quite serious, to go ahead and, all right, I'll bring this guy in and we'll have a conversation. All right? We'll do a conversation kind of a thing, kind of a trial. It is a trial in effect. But that's what he decides. All right, so something serious is going on. I've been informed that something serious is going on, so I'll take this seriously. But you guys, he's still going to have to be informed about what this is about. If he was to just simply go back into the compound and do nothing, which was what he was positioned to do, then there might be a disruption that happens maybe an hour later or a day or two later or whatever. There could be a disruption that takes place that would show that Jesus has done something that was worthy of the Romans executing him, and yet he let Jesus go. All right? So under these conditions, even though nothing, there's been no real accusation made, Pilate decides to at least have the conversation with Jesus. So Jesus is brought in, and then in verse 33, then Pilate entered the praetorium again, called Jesus, and said to him, "Are you the king of the Jews?" All right, kind of a open-ended question there. Verse 34, Jesus answered him, "Are you speaking for yourself about this, or did others tell you this concerning me?" So Jesus is asked a question, and he doesn't give an answer. His response is to ask another question. All right? Is this something that is coming from you, or is this something that other people are talking about? Can you please clarify your question a little bit? Am I the king of the Jews? Can you clarify that? Is this something coming from you? Is this something coming from somebody else? Who's making the accusation? What really is this accusation to say that I'm the king of the Jews? That's a little open-ended. Let's get this a little bit better defined about what it is that I'm being asked. Because if he just says yes or no, there could be a lot of confusion because people can make their own interpretations. Pilate can interpret his answer in many different ways. So Jesus has to ask a clarifying question in order to get some more specifics about this. He's also, in effect, stating that he's not going to answer the question to testify against himself. All right? He's not going to testify against himself for violating Roman law. So let's maybe try to refine the question a little bit more. So Jesus asked him that. In verse 35, Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew? Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me. What have you done?" That's the question. Okay, Pilate answered, "Am I a Jew?" That's a rhetorical question. Of course he's not a Jew. "Your own nation and the chief priests have delivered you to me." All right, well, okay. So the people out there and the chief priests have delivered Jesus over to him, right? What have you done? What have you done? We got all these people out here, right? Out at the front gate or the front door. We got all these people out here who are saying that you are an evil doer worthy of death, but they won't tell me what you've done. They won't tell me why you're here. They're not going to tell me that. And like I said, they are there because they are worried about their job. They are there because they want to be the savior of the people. They are there because they're concerned that the Romans might come in and reorganize everything again. There's probably a whole lot of people out there who have nothing to do with this at all either. There's probably a lot of other people out there who are just there just so that they can look good so that they can say, I'm here with the leaders. Now, you leaders, don't you see me? Huh? You notice me? I'm here. We're friends, right? Because we're here together. I'm here with you. I don't care about what you're doing. I don't care about this Jesus thing. I don't care about it's not my job. It's your job. I don't care about what might transpire, or what kind of risk you feel that we're under, whatever. I'm here just to be your friend, because I want to be your friend, especially because you're obviously very well connected. You're very popular. I've been hearing about this guy named Malchus, maybe, who got his ear taken off, and he had a divine religious experience when his ear was healed also by this Jesus guy over here. It could be that Malchus might decide he needs to find a new line of work. Maybe being the assistant of the high priest is not the kind of job that he wants anymore. Maybe he's going to be a little emotionally conflicted after this miracle that Jesus did for him, right? And so there could be a job opening. Can I have Malchus's job? All right? There could be a lot of people out there just for that. Or because they don't have anything else to do with their lives, they couldn't sleep. They were just out looking for something to do. Here's an opportunity to be a part of something just for fun. All right? And so none of these people are telling Pilate why he's there. What's he doing? None of these people will tell him why he's there. So he asks Jesus, why are you here? What have you done? They won't tell me what you've done. Nobody around here is going to tell me what you've done. None of my own troops are going to tell me what you've done. Will you tell me what you've done? Will anybody tell me what you've done? Right? Okay, so that's the real question. Are you the king of the Jews? Oh, we don't care about that. Just what have you done? Right? What's all of this about? Verse 36. Jesus answered. So, okay, look, I'll give you an answer. My kingdom is not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight, so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. But now my kingdom is not from here. Okay, so he does not answer the question, what have you done? Why are you here? He doesn't answer that question. He answers the previous question, are you a king? All right, so he got some further clarification, and in this conversation, he effectively tells Pilate that he hasn't done anything wrong, and that this just doesn't justify anything. He is a king, all right? But he's a king from out of town, all right? He's from out of town. His kingdom is not here. Haven't you noticed? Nothing's going on. There's no fighting going on. All right, look at this again. In verse 36, my kingdom is not of this world. All right, he's definitely from out of town. He's out of the planet, not of this world. If my kingdom were of this world, my servants would fight. All right, now that's the answer to the question of sedition. Has Jesus done anything that would suggest that he is violating the Roman law of sedition? Is he going to create a conflict with the Romans such that he is going to assert himself as the king of the land and expel the Romans and remove their authority over the land? And Jesus said, that is not what I am here for. I am not here for this. If that was the case, there would be a war. My servants would be fighting. There would be a conflict. There is no conflict. Look, I'm here. I'm arrested. Obviously, I'm not here in order to engage in that. Yes, I'm a king, but I'm a king, not of this world. I'm from out of town, a different kingdom entirely, a different place, a different planet, if we were to use that expression. Okay, my servants would fight so that I should not be delivered to the Jews. So I definitely would not have made it this far. I wouldn't have even been delivered to the Jews at all. I wouldn't even made it that far. All right? He would not have even made it that far. He would not have made it to where he is right now. He says, but now my kingdom is not from here. All right? And Pilate said to him, in verse 37, Pilate therefore said to him, "Are you a king then?" And Jesus answered, "You say rightly that I am a king. For this cause I was born, and for this cause I have come into the world, that I should bear witness to the truth. Everyone who is of the truth hears my voice." All right, so he says, I am a king, but I'm a king from out of town, and I'm here just to talk. That's it. I'm not here to engage in war. I'm just here to talk to people. He's just from out of town, here to talk to people. That's it. About the truth. About what's true. What's not true. It's like a vacation in that sense. So he gives Pilate what Pilate needs to know so that he is informed that Jesus is not participating in anything that is in violation of Roman law. That is how he responds to the question of what did he do and why is he there? All right, it's perfectly fine for a king from out of town to come and visit. It's perfectly fine. There were lots of other nations in the world at that time. There were other kings, other kingdoms. They could go on a vacation. They could go travel to another place, to another kingdom and visit, say hello, talk about let's have some conversations about what the truth is, what truth is about, some philosophy kind of thing. To go and just have philosophical conversations with other people from other places and other cultures. This is an expression of goodwill in many ways. And that he's not there to fight with anybody. Obviously, because it would not have gone this far if he was. And that's perfectly reasonable. All right, Pilate could look at Jesus and say, okay, so you're here from out of town. I guess eventually you'll go back to your kingdom, wherever that is. But it has no relevance to anything over here at all. Absolutely none. All right, so that conversation is over. What has Jesus done? Nothing. There is nothing to talk about anymore. There's nothing to discuss. There's no reason for a trial. All right, this is over. It's over right away in that sense. Okay, it's not over in the sense that there's more that's going to happen, but for other reasons. And so what's Pilate going to say? What is there to talk about? There's nowhere to go with, okay, you're a king from out of town. Good for you. Nice to have you stop by. And you're telling me you're not going to cause any trouble, and we have the evidence to show you're not going to cause any trouble because you've already been with the Jews over there, and if you were going to cause any trouble, you would have done it already. So, verse 38, Pilate said to him, "What is truth?" That's it. And when he had said this, he went out again to the Jews and said to them, I find no fault in him at all. So he does not appear to be interested, really, in having a conversation with Jesus about the truth. It's early in the morning. Maybe he was up late at night. We don't know what was going on. But he just simply blurts out, just expresses, well, what is truth? And then he gets up and he walks out. Right? He's got Jesus right there with him. He says, I came here to talk about the truth. He says, yeah, what is truth? Gets up and leaves. just walks away. Goes out to the front door, out to the gate, and tells the people, look, I don't see anything wrong with this guy at all. There's nothing wrong with this guy. All right, and so what are they gonna do next? What do we do now? All right, well, I'm gonna have to talk about that in the next message. Okay, this is the place where I'm gonna pause because then we get into some other things. All right, so I feel that this is a pretty good pause point or dividing point where we have identified the fact that there is no reason for Jesus to be there at all, and Pilate does his evaluation to determine this. So there's going to have to be something new, We're going to, in effect, start over. There's going to have to be something different, because he goes out to the people and he says, there's no reason for us to be here. All right, so they're going to have to do something different. For those of you who are using these messages for your small groups, I've got a question that you might consider to facilitate some discussion. What does it mean for Jesus to be a king from out of town? All right, what does that mean? For Jesus to be a king from out of town. What does that mean? And what could that imply? All right, as people have different beliefs and opinions about the world that we're a part of, and how God is a part of the world. Well, if Jesus is a king from out of town, what does that imply? What would that mean if we were to really focus and consider that point and the implications of a point like that? All right, and I think it's a good place to start some conversations. And I will continue into what happens next in the next message. Thanks.